Bordeaux, France, September 10th, 2025. The heart of Bordeaux erupted today as thousands of demonstrators gathered at the historic Place des Quinconces in support of the nationwide Let's Block Everything movement. What began as a call to resist economic policies and foreign entanglements has swiftly transformed into one of the most visible waves of protest France has seen this year, linking domestic grievances with broader international solidarity causes. The AFP TV footage from the square captured a sea of flags, banners and determined faces. Protesters filled the vast public space, many holding placards denouncing political leaders, others waving Palestinian flags as chants echoed across the city centre. The demonstration was part of a larger surge in mobilisation, spreading from Paris to Marseille, Lyon, Lille and now Bordeaux, where unions, student groups and grassroots activists are converging to make their voices heard. The phrase that has galvanised the marches, "Let's block everything," reflects both frustration with the government's economic policies and a desire to disrupt what protesters describe as political complacency in the face of international crises. From the very beginning of the Bordeaux gathering, the mood was a mixture of anger and resilience. Banners denounced François Bayrou, the centrist figure whose influence in French politics has long been polarising. One sign read bluntly, "Bye Bayrou." The scene was not just political theatre, it was also a raw demonstration of human solidarity. As one group moved through the square, the crowd erupted in a rhythmic chant, "We are all children of Gaza." The words, shouted in unison, underscored how the local protest in Bordeaux was also tied to the ongoing tragedy in the Middle East. The Bordeaux rally highlighted the interconnected nature of grievances that have been building for months. On one level, unions like the CGT are angry over domestic labour reforms and economic pressures that they argue punish workers while rewarding corporations. On another level, activist groups have seized on France's foreign policy stance, particularly regarding the Gaza crisis, to demand a reorientation of national priorities. Signs blended these themes. One placard, carried alongside a Palestinian flag, urged, "Listen to Bast, not news." The reference was a pointed critique of French media coverage, accusing major networks of parroting establishment narratives rather than reflecting the voices of the street. Bordeaux's Place des Quinconces is no ordinary square. Its vast expanse has historically served as a stage for mass gatherings, demonstrations and cultural events. On this September afternoon, it was transformed into a canvas of resistance. The wide shots captured by AFP TV revealed just how many people filled the space, banners fluttering above the crowd, the red of union flags mixing with the green, black and white of Palestinian symbols. The choreography of the protest told its own story. A pan across the square revealed a tapestry of causes, workers' rights, anti-austerity slogans and international solidarity woven into a single march. This was not a neatly organised rally with a single message. It was instead a coalition of frustrations, each reinforcing the other. The Let's Block Everything slogan first appeared weeks ago in Paris, where students and labour unions staged sit-ins and transport disruptions. The phrase quickly spread on social media, where it became a rallying cry for disillusioned youth who feel the political establishment is deaf to their concerns. In Marseille, protests blocked major intersections. In Lille, student occupations of university halls made headlines. And in Lyon, thousands marched past the préfecture, calling for both domestic reform and a more principled foreign policy. By the time the movement reached Bordeaux, it had already gathered the momentum of a national phenomenon. Government officials have largely downplayed the demonstrations, describing them as isolated outbursts rather than a cohesive political threat. But opposition leaders see it differently. Leftist figures have praised the mobilisation as evidence of a resurgent grassroots movement, while far-right commentators have condemned it as chaos orchestrated by unions and foreign sympathisers. The inclusion of Palestinian solidarity slogans has especially rattled certain political circles. Supporters argue that international solidarity is integral to the French tradition of protest, while critics dismiss it as a distraction from domestic issues. Either way, the connection to Gaza has undeniably given the protests a global dimension that makes them harder to ignore. Walking among the crowd, one could sense the emotional intensity. Parents pushed strollers while carrying banners. Elderly marchers leaned on canes but refused to stay home. Teenagers held up hand-painted signs. The chant, "We are all children of Gaza," reverberated not only as a political slogan, but as an expression of shared vulnerability and anger at violence abroad. FPTV cameras lingered on faces, serious, defiant, sometimes hopeful. A protester waved a large Palestinian flag next to the red standard of the CGT union, visually merging international solidarity with domestic labour activism. Analysts say the timing of the protests is no coincidence. France is facing economic uncertainty, with inflation eroding purchasing power and unemployment stubbornly high in certain regions. At the same time, foreign policy crises, from Gaza to Ukraine, have heightened public frustration with a government that many accuse of prioritising international diplomacy over domestic needs. In Bordeaux, a city often viewed as a bastion of calm compared to Paris or Marseille, the eruption of thousands of protesters signalled that the discontent runs deeper and wider than some officials had assumed. The sign declaring "Bye Bayrou" was not an isolated message. François Bayrou, a long-time centrist voice in French politics, has become a lightning rod for criticism. Protesters accuse him of embodying the very elite detachment they are mobilising against. His recent comments defending government policies were cited repeatedly as evidence that leaders are out of touch with ordinary citizens. For many in the Bordeaux crowd, Bayrou was not just a politician, he was a symbol of an establishment unwilling to listen. That explains why his name was singled out, even though the protests had multiple targets. The placard reading "Listen to Bass, not News" spoke to a growing distrust of mainstream media outlets. Protesters argue that networks such as CNews give disproportionate airtime to government voices and commentators hostile to protest movements, while ignoring grassroots perspectives. This distrust is not new. French media coverage of the Yellow Vest protests years earlier faced similar accusations. The continuity suggests that the media question remains a central grievance whenever mass mobilisations occur. What remains uncertain is whether the "Let's Block Everything" movement can sustain itself beyond street demonstrations. Activists are calling for strikes, sit-ins and coordinated disruptions of public infrastructure. But unions are divided over how far to escalate, and political parties remain hesitant to officially endorse the movement. For now, the protests thrive on visibility. Footage from Bordeaux showing thousands in the streets reinforces the perception of a movement gaining momentum. The chants, signs and flags act as both political message and performance, designed to ensure the protest cannot be ignored. The explicit references to Gaza highlight how French protests often blur the line between domestic and international causes. For younger protesters in particular, solidarity with Palestinians has become a defining feature of political identity. Critics see this as diluting the focus on French economic issues, but supporters argue that injustice abroad and inequality at home are connected by the same structures of power. Whether the Bordeaux protest becomes a turning point depends on what happens next. If demonstrations spread further, the government may be forced to respond with concessions or repression. If momentum wanes, the movement could join the long list of French protest waves that made noise but changed little. For now, the images are striking. Thousands packed into Place de Quinconces, chanting, waving flags, and holding signs that combine local frustration with global solidarity. The words captured on banners and in chants will linger. "We are all children of Gaza" and "Bye Bayrou." As night fell over Bordeaux, the protesters dispersed slowly, their banners folded, but their message unmistakable. They had come together under the banner of "Let's Block Everything," and, at least for this day, they succeeded in blocking the complacency of silence.